The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Ladies and gentlemen, moving along the timeline of American history, let's take a moment to reflect on this painting of the first president, George Washington.
Sorry, I hate to be a spoiled sport, but George Washington wasn't the first president.
What?
Actually, he was our 8th president.
You must be mistaken. Why, it's right here in my history book.
Well, like a lot of things in history, sometimes they get lost in translation.
If Washington wasn't our first president, then who was?
His name was John Hanson.
Never heard of him.
That's a new one on me.
Then let me explain. You see, before the Constitution was initiated, the states got together and wrote the Articles of Confederation. These Articles of Confederation unified the 13 states that fought in the Revolution.
Wow, I remember learning that in school.
You know, now that you mention it, me too, but it kind of took a backseat to our Constitution.
Exactly. However, it remained an important part of our history. The Articles of Confederation remained in effect for 8 years. They were in effect from March 1st, 1781 through March 4th, 1789.
I haven't learned that in school yet. Anyway, why should we care about something that's only lasted 8 years?
Well, I'm sure you've heard that old saying, we learn by our mistakes. That's exactly what the Articles of Confederation accomplished. It quickly led to problems that our founding fathers realized were not fixable. Here's a few facts about some of those problems. Almost every state had its own military. And how about this? Each state printed its own currency.
That alone must have been confusing.
You mean every time you crossed from one state to another, you had to exchange currency?
Yes, and each state was responsible for preserving their own sovereignty, and that alone led to frequent arguments between the states.
Sounds like they created a real mess. So where does this guy John Hanson fit in?
I'm so glad you asked. Once they signed the Articles of Confederation, they needed a president to run the country. Now, John Hanson came from a long line of patriots. One of his nephews was a military secretary to George Washington. During the Revolution, another was governor of Maryland. 2 of his sons were killed in action with the Continental Army. Another nephew signed the Declaration, and another signed the Constitution. And under that new Constitution, a grandson served as a member of Congress. So as you can see, by his lineage alone, he contributed greatly to our nation's heritage.
It makes me want to check my genealogy and see what my ancestors were doing back in the day.
He served as president from November 5th, 1781 to November 3rd, 1782. Since he was the first president, the role was poorly defined. His actions in office would set the precedent for all future presidents. He established the Great Seal of the United States, which all presidents have since been required to use on all official documents. He established the Treasury Department, the first Secretary of War, and the first Foreign Affairs Department.
Wow, that's quite impressive considering that he's almost unheard of.
And here's another fact I bet you didn't know. President John Hanson declared the 4th Thursday of every November to be Thanksgiving Day. And we all know it still is.
No way, I can't wait to tell that to my friends.
So when did George Washington become president?
Well, technically you could say that George Washington was our 8th president and our first president. There were 6 presidents after John Hanson and before George Washington. Technically, the Articles of Confederation lasted 8 years. You can look them up.
And how come we're taught George Washington was our first president?
Oh, that's easy. When the Founding Fathers realized that the Articles of Confederation weren't working, they set up a meeting in Philadelphia on May 25th, 1787.
It was the Constitutional Convention.
That's right. A new doctrine needed to be written, and it became our Constitution. And under that new Constitution, George Washington was elected to be our first president.
Wow, I guess you're never too old to learn something new.
Or forgotten.
I guess my history book needs a little updating. Well, thank you for sharing that. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please follow me to our next destination.
So who was our first president? George Washington or John Hanson? You decide. And that's just another little known fact about American history. But now you know.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.